Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this Monday's edition of Alaska Weather on this first day of March 2021. I'm Dave Percy, I'm meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. And up first here, we've got the Hazardous weather graphic, and starting out in the southwest there, we've got winter weather advisory out until noon Tuesday for the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta and Nunivak Island area. That's for a system coming in, that low pressure out there in the Bering Sea tracking eastward, and that's going to bring snow and blowing snow across the area there. Looking for another 1 to 4 inches of snow. Saw Bethel picked up about 4 to 5 inches today in the last 12 hours, so looking for about another shot of snow there, continue for about the same amount into noon tomorrow. With winds gusting to 40 miles an hour, that will reduce visibilities to possibly less than half a mile at times. And from there, going up to the north, wind chill advisories, St. Lawrence Island, Bering Strait coast, including the north shore of the Seward Peninsula there, the northwest coast, Noatak Valley, Kobuk Valley, western central Arctic coast, and the eastern north slope there. Those are all for wind chill advisories for wind chills of 40 to 55 degrees below zero, and they're basically out for the eastern north slope until noon on Tuesday. In fact, they're all out until noon on Tuesday. And then the red area up there is a wind chill warning for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, and that's out until noon Tuesday. Wind chills 60 65 degrees below zero. And then dropping way down south there to the greater Yakutat area, eastern North Gulf Coast, that's a heavy snow warning that's out. It's been out, and that's going to remain out until 9 p.m. this evening, and could pick up another 1 to 2 inches of snow until the warning ends, with winds gusting 35 miles an hour. And that'll give some areas anywhere from 6 to 8 inches total there, especially around Yakutat. And one more small zone there, and that's a snow advisory for the Klondike Highway, Skagway, Haines area. And that's out all night tonight for an additional 7 inches of snow with winds gusting to 50 miles an hour. And of course, that'll reduce visibilities possibly to less than half a mile at times. And from there, taking a look at satellite imagery, you can see clouds moving quite rapidly from west to east there in the northern Gulf of Alaska, southern Alaska, and to a much slower extent over the central northern interior, kind of lifting more of a northerly direction there, with the main jet, of course, to the south, and then that intense storm out over the Bering Sea, now weakening, but brings some pretty good winds into the eastern Aleutians and the Pribilof Islands today. St. George Island, peak gusts 67 miles an hour so far, and let's see, Nikolsky at about 65 miles an hour, and Unalaska in that 50 to 60 mile per hour range. Also looking at 50 to 60 mile an hour wind gusts for the Alaska Peninsula. And the southwest coast, winds already starting to pick up out of the south and southeast, 30 to 40 miles per hour. And that'll continue into tonight as that low tracks eastward. And actually, it will end up near Kodiak Island on Wednesday. Otherwise, widespread area snow, anywhere from 3 to 6 inches fell across south central Alaska today in some areas, with winds, snow and wind picking up in the Seward area. They're seeing north gusts 35 miles an hour, continued light snow falling Anchorage all the way down to Kachamak Bay around the Homer area. And let's see, again, I mentioned Bethel picked up anywhere from 3 to 6 inches of snow, or 4 to 5 there, give or take. And then other areas, kind of a widespread area of lighter snow falling across much of the interior today. A little bit of a break behind the front there, northeast Bristol Bay and down toward Kodiak Island, and then the main low itself bringing another round of increasing wind and snow and rain into the southwest coast. And you can see on today's chart, there's that low west of the Pribilofs that brought that near gusts 70 miles an hour to the Pribilofs today. But you can see the stronger, tighter gradient actually between the Pribilofs and the east central Aleutian areas. So the Fox Islands and Adak and Atka did not get the strongest winds they could have if that low had been a little farther to the south. Windy conditions with precipitation, Alaska Peninsula on up into actually south, covering much of southern Alaska, and rain and wind into the Panhandle. Snow, pick maybe 4 to 6, as I mentioned, for Yakutat. Look for another 4 to 6 until the warning ends. And for tomorrow, for tonight, rain and snow for the southeast coast. That low tracks inland with snow covering much of southern Alaska all the way up to the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And then Tuesday, get a lot less in the way of snow up north there, just some flurries right along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And then that low tracks to Kodiak. Cold air on the backside of that again comes southward on some pretty gusty north winds, anywhere from 40 to 55 miles an hour from the Yukon Delta coast down across the Alaska Peninsula. Look for it to dry out over south central Alaska, Copper River Basin, northern interior. Southeast coast stays in a wet weather pattern, and high pressure builds into the western Aleutians, but that gets replaced by an intense front coming in on Wednesday. Now heading to the lows, 30s for the Panhandle, a little above zero south central Alaska, upper 20s Kodiak Island, below zero north of the Alaska Range, to maybe 30 to 45 below for the North Slope, well below zero St. Lawrence Island, upper teens for the Pribilofs. And highs tomorrow, 20 southern Alaska, 30s for the Panhandle, near 40 for Kodiak, and single numbers Tanana Valley to a little below zero to the Arctic coast, 30s out west, and lows Wednesday morning, upper 20s to upper 30s for the Panhandle, mid-20s Kodiak Island, a little below zero for the Copper River Basin, single numbers south central Alaska, northern Kuskokwim Valley, 10 below, and again below zero, 10 to 20 or 25 below north of the Alaska Range, to 30 to 40 below for the North Slope on out to the Arctic coast, and upper 20s to 30s out in the Bering Sea there. Teens, lower teens for the Pribilofs, and then the highs, upper 30s, lower 40s for the Panhandle, and teens and 20s southern Alaska.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First line weather graphic, Tuesday morning, VFR northern Bering Sea, St. Matthew Island, right on up to the northwest coast, and then pick up the marginal VFR, Cape Lisburne, and that covers all the Arctic coast up there with some IFR along the west central North Slope into the Brooks Range, and then IFR, eastern interior, all the way down the Copper River Basin to Yakutat, and then the eastern Panhandle, marginal VFR for the eastern North Gulf Coast. VFR Prince William Sound southwest there to, it looks like Chiniak, Marmot Bay, Fognak Island into Kamishak Bay, Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, marginal. Lots of IFR from the western Alaska Range westward there across Kuskokwim Valley, in across the Delta to Nunivak Island, and just north of the Pribilofs there, south of St. Matthew. Marginal VFR, Bering Sea, and Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. And for the afternoon, we've got marginal VFR over the central interior, getting a little more widespread over the, from the hills just north of Fairbanks there, say Chena, up across the Yukon Flats to the Arctic coast, all of the North Slope Brooks Range, and then the Brooks Range itself, got some IFR that's spilling either side of the crest of the mountains there, mostly from west or east of the DeLong Mountains, over to the border, and then a small zone of IFR off the southwest coast there, just reaching Cape Newenham and the Alaska Peninsula, basically marginal for the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. Northern Bering Sea stays VFR into the Yukon Delta, and the western interior, Seward Peninsula to Noatak, Kobuk Valley, and maybe even the extreme western or southwestern Koyukuk Valley, and north of the Alaska Range there, Fairbanks, Upper Tanana Valley areas. And then for the morning Wednesday, still central interior of the state, Kuskokwim Valley IFR right on up into the, just about almost to, say, Tanana, and then central interior itself, marginal VFR. Some IFR on the western Brooks Range, otherwise marginal for the Arctic coast North Slope, and also some IFR there for the eastern interior, Upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country, and just a patch there over the Talkeetna Mountains, and some marginal VFR into the Copper River Basin, eastern North Gulf Coast, Panhandle IFR, Lynn Canal Glacier Bay, and then over toward the eastern interior of the Panhandle, and also for Bristol Bay and along the north side of the Alaska Peninsula, and then a big zone of IFR with the next system spreading over the southwest Bering, heading eastward, but not quite making it to Adak and Atka. And for the afternoon, that zone still is west of Adak, a little closer, but not too much, and pushing northward into the, covering just about all the western, and then pushing into the central Bering Sea, probably Wednesday evening. And otherwise, VFR on the increase here for the interior. Kodiak Island looking really good, northeastern Bristol Bay. Some marginal VFR along the Alaska Range, spilling into the Fairbanks area, northward, almost into the southern Yukon Flats, and also for the North Slope and Arctic coast, kind of marginal. And sort of marginal with some VFR for the Panhandle. Passes, Anaktuvuk, IFR. Adigan, same forecast, IFR, especially on the northern entrances up there. Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR with a good chance of some IFR on both western approaches. That same forecast holds for rainy as well. IFR possible on the western entrance. Windy, marginal. Isabel, marginal VFR, maybe VFR on the Tanana Valley side. And that same forecast for Mentasta as well, with the possible marginal VFR in the pass and south, VFR to the north. Tanita, VFR west entrance, otherwise marginal. And for Portage, mostly marginal tomorrow. Chilkoot and White, IFR. Freezing levels, the numbered the free air freezing level is 2,000 feet, way to the south, just barely reaching the Queen Charlotte at the surface, south of the Pribilofs, north of most of the Aleutians along the Alaska Peninsula, North Gulf Coast, and down the east side of the Panhandle. Icing, southeast coast, still pretty vulnerable to possible areas, not too widespread, a considerable moderate rime or mixed icing with lighter icing potential for the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, maybe the Copper River Basin, and then another zone of elevated potential, which isn't that great there for the Alaska Peninsula and Southeast Bering. Jet stream, upper level trough right over interior Alaska, west-northwest, 150 knots into the west central Bering Sea over that high, and the main jet south, the core of the jet south of the Panhandle. And same pattern at 9,000 feet there, 45 to 65 knot winds there coming for the Bering Sea to the Aleutians, and the stronger winds south of the Panhandle, light and variable over the interior. And 3,000 feet, about the same. Strong winds, 55 knots through the Bering Strait, turning northwest 50 to 55 knots from the Pribilofs across the Fox Islands with moderate chop, Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, Nunivak Island, northward to the northwest or western Brooks Range.
Some places on the surface you might have these steep cracks and giant fissures that you would have to be careful not to fall into. In other places you might see towers of ice right next to places that were relatively smooth. You might see places that were dark. Ice there takes the form of rock. It's frozen solid until you dig down into that ocean. So you may see some things that look similar to Earth, but you may see some things that are very different.
That voice you just heard?
I am Morgan Cable, NASA scientist.
I love it.
That's Morgan. She's probably one of NASA's best spokespeople for exploring our solar system's icy moons.
Europa is a fascinating place. It has this liquid water ocean that's about 3 times the volume of all of Earth's oceans combined. That's a lot of water.
To understand what makes Earth so special, sometimes you need to back up and take in the big picture. Remember, the cryosphere is every place on Earth with frozen water. And water is one of the biggest indicators for life.
Every place, at least so far, that we have found life, we found water along with it.
And so far, Earth is the only planet we know of with life. Although Europa isn't the only icy moon in our solar system, NASA has identified it as one of those places with key astrobiological potential. Morgan is a collaborator on the Mapping Imaging Spectrometer for Europa, an instrument selected for NASA's next mission to Jupiter's icy moon Europa. But she's also more than just a scientist working in a laboratory. She's preparing future NASA missions for success on the surface of alien worlds. This year, Morgan and her colleagues were in the field studying how life colonizes in fresh lava.
Earth, it turns out, has a lot of excellent, what we call analog environments, places that are similar enough to some of these other worlds that we can conduct some tests and we can do some analyses here. Now, they're not perfect, of course. They're not going to be exactly like Europa, but we can still learn a lot by testing in these environments. Some of these places include Antarctica and the Arctic Circle, but there are other places too, Alaska, Greenland, even Iceland. Any place where you have a lot of ice, because guess what the surface of Europa is made of? A lot of ice.
Studying the cryosphere doesn't just have big implications for Earth. It also matters for the frozen worlds in our own cosmic backyard.
If we're able to find life or evidence of past life on a place like Europa, that tells us that not only can life happen in other places, but it's common enough that it happened at least twice in the same tiny solar system. That means that the universe is wide open in terms of how much life we might find, the types of life we might find. It would revolutionize how we see ourselves and the possibilities for contact in the universe. It would be amazing. Oh, it's so exciting.
As it flows down the valleys, it actually carves those valleys out and it makes them deeper. So it creates these beautiful fjords where the ice flows down, snakes out down to the ocean or to the lakes or further inland. And so that ice is flowing, it's moving. My interest in glaciers comes from the sheer size of these things and how much they're able to change on human timescales. And so the amount of mass and energy being transferred by glaciers around the globe is tremendous. It's an absolutely fascinating thing to study from space.
Mountain glaciers are some of the most charismatic parts of the cryosphere. Some might cling to the edges of cliffs at higher elevations, then lay bare and flat in a broad plain, looking cracked and weathered like elephant skin, before tumbling thousands of feet toward the sea and terminating in a dramatic calving front. They're like motion frozen in time, until they aren't. They tell a story about the distant past and yet are incredibly responsive to the present. You can understand why they'd be captivating to all of us, and especially cryospheric scientists. Meet Alex Gardner, a cryospheric scientist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, who is going to help break down what a classic West Coast North American glacier might look like, where high amounts of snow dump onto the mountains.
And at higher elevations, there's melt in summer, but not enough melt to get rid of all of that snow. And so that snow accumulates, it compacts, it turns into ice, and it starts to flow under its own weight, and it flows down the valleys. And as it flows down the valleys, it actually carves those valleys out and it makes them deeper. And so it creates these beautiful fjords where the ice flows down, snakes out and down to the ocean or to the lakes or further inland. And so that ice is flowing, it's moving.
Alex uses satellite data to study large-scale changes in glacial ice. But 2,000 miles to the north, Chris Larson from the University of Alaska Fairbanks spends a lot of time studying glaciers from the air. He's been flying over Alaskan mountain glaciers for many years, most recently on a NASA-funded mission called Operation Icebridge Alaska. He's absolutely enamored with his local rivers of ice.
And what do you love about mountain glaciers?
Well, they're in mountains, so they're really pretty.
You couldn't ask for a better way to experience Alaska on a large scale than to go flying around for campaign after campaign and look at all of the mountains in Alaska. Truly infinite. You just feel like you'll never see the end of them, and you don't want to either.
But Chris doesn't spend weeks away from home and family for the views. Chris and his colleagues at NASA want to answer some pretty big questions by learning more about Alaskan glaciers and how they tick.
You know, why does NASA care about these? Well, they actually disproportionately contribute a large amount to sea level rise.
In the long run, as the Earth warms due to climate change, the big ice sheets and mighty outlet glaciers of Greenland and Antarctica stand to contribute the most to sea level rise, simply because the vast majority of the planet's ice is stored there. But currently, it's the world's smaller mountain glaciers in comparatively warmer places like Alaska and Patagonia that are contributing about a third of all inputs to sea level rise, even though they account for only 1% of the world's ice.
Mostly due to them being dynamic. They have water at the bed, which allows them to slide fast, and they react quickly to climate change and have higher velocities than their polar counterparts.
Back at JPL, AKwx uses satellite measurements of global ice and computer models to predict ultimately how much sea level rise we might see due to climate change. But in the case of mountain glaciers, we also care about the local impacts of disappearing ice.
When we think of changes in ice sheets, we typically think of just what is the consequence for sea level rise and the future evolution of the ice sheets. But glaciers in other regions, like high mountain Asia, Alaska, the European Alps, these are places where changes in runoff matters to stream flows. In places like high mountain Asia, you have a lot of glaciers that feed the streams that flow down to populated regions. And that runoff becomes significant for water resources, irrigation, and agriculture.
Both Alex and Chris are passionate about understanding how glaciers are changing and what it means for our planet's future. They'll continue to use tools like elevation maps from the ICESat-2 satellite and detailed airborne measurements to monitor changing ice.
By the end of the tunnel, you're about 100 feet underground, and you're surrounded by bones sticking out of the wall from the steppe bison and the mastodons. There's sticks that are 40,000 years old. There's grass that's still green, that's tens of thousands of years old.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Back today's sea ice analysis, showing ice northern Bristol Bay and then west-northwest, a little bit farther south of St. Matthew Island there than it has been, but otherwise not a lot of change over the last week or so out there in the Bering Sea, as well as Cook Inlet, a little bit more in Kamishak Bay though. And moving on to the, there we go, for the marine forecast for the southwest coast, or for the southwest winds along the southeast coast at 20 knots with seas running 16 to 17 feet, south 20 on the north coast, and then pretty breezy there for the northern inside water, especially Lynn Canal, sustained 25 knots gusts to 40 knots, 5-foot seas, gale force gusts also for Stevens Passage, otherwise sustained out of the south at 20 knots, southeast 15 for Clarence Strait. Outlook for Wednesday, lighter winds in store for the, especially the inside waters there, a little more variable. South 15 over the Clarence Strait area, Stevens Passage, north 15 and northwest 15 for Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay area. And along the south coast, south to southeast, 20 to 25 knot winds, and east southeast, 20 knots for the north coast, and seas on the north coast, 12 to 14 feet and 15 to 16 feet in the south coast. Northern Cook Inlet tomorrow, light winds out of the north at 10 knots, Prince William Sound, not too bad, northeast at 10, 2-foot seas, southwest 20 though for the eastern North Gulf Coast, and then northeast at 15 for the western North Gulf Coast. Barren Islands, west winds, only 15 knots. Small craft advisories for Kamishak Bay and southern Cook Inlet, where northeast winds will be 25 knots. And then for Wednesday, north 20 knots for southern Cook Inlet, north 10 north of Forelands. Gale warnings for the Kamishak Bay area, northwest at about 35 knots, 9-foot seas. Barren Islands north at 30 knots. Otherwise, the North Gulf Coast, north to northeast, 20 knots, 7 to 8-foot seas, and Prince William Sound winds mostly out of the north at 15 knots. Kodiak Island, east side of the island there, Bognac Island, west 25, small craft advisories there. Shelikof Strait, though, only northeast at 15. Gale warnings, 35-knot winds, pick up to 40 knots from Castle Cape and the Alaska, well, across the Alaska Peninsula, west winds 45 knots, and Bristol Bay north at 20. And then for Wednesday, Kodiak Island, north 30 knots on the east side, northwest 25 for small craft advisory, Shelikof Strait, and northwest 40 knots for the Alaska Peninsula, seas around 20 feet. Gale warnings, Castle Cape to Sitkinak, northwest 35 and 30 knots out of the north for Bristol Bay. And Fox Islands, Unmak Island, west-northwest 45 knots. Actually, Unmak Island, Alaska Island, that'll cover it pretty well, just under storm force with seas running 26 to 33 feet. West-northwest 40-45 knots for the central Aleutians, and then winds finally diminishing as you head west there, down to 30 knots for Shimmy and Attu out of the west. But back to the storms on Wednesday for Shimmy and Attu, probably not making it to Kiska, possibly in the late afternoon. Amchitka coming up to 45 knots again with 20-foot seas. Adakanatka southwest 40 knots, 15-foot seas. And gale warnings for the eastern Aleutians, southwest 35, Unmak Island, northwest 35 to 40 for on Alaska Island. Southwest coast gale warnings along the Kuskokwim Delta coastline. North of Nunivak Island, brisk wind advisories, north 30 knots. Gale warnings, St. Lawrence Island, north 30. Gales also for the Pribilofs, northwest 40 with 25-foot seas. Norton Sound, brisk wind advisories, north at 25. And then for Wednesday, Norton Sound, northwest 15. Otherwise, gale warnings along the southwest coast. Northerlies, 35 to 40 knots. South, 40 knots for some gale warnings for the Pribilofs. Storm warnings, northern Bering Sea, St. Matthew Island, southeast or east-southeast at 50 knots. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, east to northeast winds, 15 to 20 knots, and northeast winds at 20 for the central coast. Northerlies at 20 on the west side. And brisk wind advisories, Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort for northerlies at 35 knots, and then gale force northerlies right on down to the Bering Strait. And for Wednesday, those fall back to about 25 knots there from Wales to Cape Thompson, and then 15-knot winds from Cape Thompson all the way up to the central coast. And those continue to drop off on the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, northeast at 10. And for tonight, widespread area snow continues, south central Alaska into the interior, and that low tracks eastward toward the southwest coast there. So windy with snow and blowing snow. Wind chill advisories continue to the eastern Arctic coast, and the heavy snow warning ends for the Klondike Highway later for heavy snow. And the winter weather advisory continues to the southwest coast, Kuskokwim Delta, Yukon Delta, with gusts 40 miles an hour. And for the day tomorrow, Tuesday, that low tracks to just near Kodiak Island and weakens. And then on Wednesday, drier weather, but wet.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.